Welcome back, guys.
Yeah.
We're talking about, well, first of all, I'm Takashi69, and I'm here with Bobby.
Billy Loomis.
And we're talking New Nightmare, the 7th movie in the Freddy Kruger franchise, and technically the last of the original set of films. There's kind of a spin-off, and then there was a remake, but this was like the last of the original set.
Yeah, and even then it came out after part 6, which was called Freddy's Dead.
And this one isn't really a sequel.
No, it's
not even really to the first movie.
No, it's not. It's actually a what if all the movies were just movies?
So this was my selection, but immediately about the first hour watching it, I sort of regretted choosing it because I wasn't sure if I liked it for like the first hour watching it.
What was it that you didn't like?
I forgot how meta the whole thing was and how long it took to get to the Nightmare on Elm Street feel. So it takes like an hour and 10 minutes till we actually see real Freddy. We see Robert Englund dressed up like Freddy. We'll see like the hand in a dream.
You see things happen.
But I remember thinking when I was watching, I was like, why do Nightmare fans like this movie so much? It doesn't have like the vibe of the other movies. It doesn't have the mythology of the other movies. It's instead of Middle America, it's like a bunch of Hollywood. Why? What was the like? Did you see this one in theaters?
I did. I saw it. I remember exactly the night. I remember everything about that night because I had to force a girl to go see it with me. Her mom, or my mom and her parents were friends. They wanted to go see a movie, but we didn't want to go see it. So I was like, I want to go see this. And
what was the initial reaction? Were there people like me who were like, this isn't good, I don't want this? Freddy Krueger's not even really Freddy Krueger. Like, he's not the Freddy Krueger you know.
Yeah, okay, so this one, I walked into it not knowing. I thought it was just going to be another people sequel. Start dreaming and they start getting killed by Freddy. Yeah. I had no idea it was going to be this whole meta thing, like what if the movies were just movies?
Yeah.
Wes Craven plays himself. Heather Langenkamp plays herself. Yeah. Everybody, Robert Englund.
Yeah.
And it's funny enough that the guy that's on set, or the guy that plays her husband in the movie, is actually her husband in real life, who was a makeup effects artist, and that's how they met in real life. And so Wes Craven wrote that guy into the story just to make it even that much more real feeling.
Right.
I remember as a kid watching this because I think I was 6th, 7th grade when this came out. Mm-hmm. Sounds about right. I remember loving it. I remember being freaked out. One, because in the movie, it's addressing what if this could really happen? Right. The movies were just fake. And so it's sort of like made you feel like you felt watching the first movie. Like, what if he could get you in your dreams? Well, now it's just like, what if Freddy actually is real? Like, but this, he's not in the dreams though. He actually starts coming out into real life.
That's right. And so, I mean, the first thing I wrote as a note outside of did people like this movie when it first came out? It seems like most people were on board with it.
Oh no, I think what it was is that
they had seen 5 other movies that were doing that other thing, and they're ready for something different.
It had gotten so cheesy by Freddy's Dead that everybody was so grateful that we were watching a serious, well-written, engaging Wes Craven film, because it's, I mean, and maybe you weren't liking it and were wanting to turn it off, remember not liking it because it wasn't exactly what you remembered.
Right.
I remember kind of what you said for me, being relieved that it wasn't the same old cheeseball stuff.
This is different. This isn't... And it does a good job in kind of making you want all of the original feelings of the original Nightmare. And it's
very 90s.
It waits like pretty much to the last act of the movie, and then it's like, oh, there's the music again, and there's the original house again, and now we feel like we're in Middle America and not like in a swanky LA suburb. Yeah. And when you get those, you're like, oh wow, I've been waiting for this so long. It actually kind of works.
It's kind of like waiting for the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park.
Exactly. So I had a weird experience. As the movie went on, I started to appreciate it more, but I also found it like a very frustrating movie for a lot of the watch, because I was like, wow, so like really the mythology's gone. Like like Freddy Krueger has one of the best origin mythology stories, right? He was like burned to death and vigilante justice. Now he's haunting the dreams. It was like
child killer, all that.
All that's completely gone.
It's not even. They don't even mention it.
They don't even mention it
because it's not real. It's not a real character.
It's not real. So Freddy is a different Freddy in this movie.
He is.
He's a different character, and I was like, it took me a while to be like okay with that, I guess. It is very 90s, which you said, and it is, yeah, it's extremely 90s. It's also so meta. It's more meta than Scream ever was.
Well, I think Scream got made because of this movie.
Okay. And
it feels a lot like Scream at certain moments.
It feels a lot like Scream. And I think it was like, okay, so Wes Craven was into this meta idea, and this actually takes it even further than Scream. It kind of, it almost takes it further than even like Cabin in the Woods in terms of like meta horror movies, where it's like the actual actors are there and they're like talking about the script and they'll say something and then the script will have.
And at one point, her son is actually watching part one.
Right. Yeah. No. So it's super meta. Now, it's also super 90s, and 90s feels very sincere. And I don't know if that was like intentional or if that was like clashing.
What do you mean sincere?
So, it's not tongue-in-cheek at all. Like 90s is very like sort of serious. So there's one scene in particular that like made me think of this. But when I'm gonna call her Nancy, but Heather Langenkamp's son is on top of the like rocket ship playground.
Mm-hmm. John Saxon's out there with him.
And there's like the most intense operatic music ever playing.
And he's reaching for the sky.
And I was like, this is taking itself so seriously, almost so seriously that I don't know if they're making a joke out of it. Because the whole movie is meta. Like, is it kind of a joke that it's doing this, or is this just the 90s?
That's the 90s.
Okay.
Rewatch The Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
Okay.
The Hand That Rocks the Cradle with Rebecca De Mornay.
It's
like about a nanny who's wanting to, steal the life of this wife, whatever. And yes, it's the same deal. The music is just way over the top, super like orchestrated, gothic sounding. And again, this was in a time to where they were trying to get away from the 80s synthesizer sounds. So scored movies is what you did. You had an orchestra and you scored movies then. You didn't do it. Honestly, jumping off on a side note, it wasn't until you had Hans Zimmer doing action films and saying, no, I can do this with a synthesizer. And then now you have movies like Inception being done with a synthesizer. Yeah. But it works better now.
And I guess things that go in and out of, modes of being popular.
They were just trying so hard in the 90s to not be the 80s that was one of the things. They wanted to make it over serious, so now it doesn't hold up. I know exactly what you're talking about, because it's like, it's just a kid about to fall off of a toy, a playground.
They put really soft sand there for a reason.
Right, and there's a ton of people, including yourself, that can catch him. You see him.
But that was one of those moments, like, this is almost so serious that it feels like it could be a joke, and there's so many like meta things in this movie. But it's simultaneously super meta, but meta usually implies kind of comedy, and instead this is like super serious.
No, it's very serious, and I think that the idea is they even talk about Robert Englund talking to Heather Langenkamp, and for some reason she's not feeling right. She feels like something's wrong. Always wearing these damn glasses.
It's like painting with these glasses on. You're like, how can you see the painting?
And again, he's painting Freddy Krueger horror stuff, but it makes you think: is he really Freddy?
Okay,
for a second.
So that's an interesting thing,
because it's almost like it's a whodunit for a second.
For a second, I think I have to like transport myself maybe more back to the time when this movie was made to really appreciate it, because I'm sure a lot of people were just flat out confused, right? Like when you said you went into it kind of thinking it was just going to be another nightmare movie. Once it's like, wait.
I mean, I knew there'd be a conflict. I knew there'd be something they have to solve, whatever, but I didn't know it was going to be like...
This is Heather Langenkamp and not Nancy.
Right. I thought we were going to see Nancy again.
Yeah.
And at this point, I'd only seen like 1, 2, and 3. I'd never seen 4 and 5 yet at this point.
Right. So it's almost like this isn't even a sequel. It's almost like this is a brand new movie.
It is.
And so you're meeting these characters for the first time, and then it moves so quickly and it's so serious. And I was like, I don't know if I like this movie. Well, it took me a while. I ended up with the movie being like, I really like it, but I think some things I think they didn't do the best they could.
I think what they want you to do for the first hour and the way you're feeling
is just be like,
they want you to not feel like you're watching a Freddy movie. I think he wants you to feel like you're watching something else, and then boom, it turns into a Freddy movie.
Yeah.
Because it does turn into a Freddy movie. What I like about it is that he's more like the devil incarnate in this. He's more like somebody pulled the devil through to the other side rather than this, like you said, the origin of the child killer and all that. This, he's got the whole fedora, but it's like cool, and he's got the trench coat.
Yeah.
It's more like he's like a messenger of Satan in this.
Right, and he's got the snakes and even his like dream, I guess not even really exactly
but his lair or whatever,
it's like, Greek or Roman architecture, and
it seems more connected to like the Necronomicon than anything.
And there's that moment, doesn't she like go out of like a Freddy face, and it's like,
well, they're like in a dungeon basically,
exactly.
And he's got the tongue that's wrapping around everything. Like it becomes more of like straight evil.
Yes. So I once I kind of accepted, okay, I think I know what they're doing with this movie, and this isn't really. I think I remembered it being more of a sequel proper, and it had been a while since I saw it. Now my initial reaction to this movie was my brother had rented it from Blockbuster. And my Blockbuster, and I was like, "Well, you're gonna see the movie, so I'm gonna see the movie too." And he said, "No, I'm 8 and you're 6."
Man, stellar parody.
So you're not going to see the movie, and I am. You're too young. I at the mature age of like 9.
Yeah, well, when you're 9, you've been through so much at that point.
Yeah, this was 9 in the 90s. So
you really know how to break it down at 9.
At that point, you'd had a couple jobs, maybe a wife.
Already kicked cigarettes.
Kicked cigarettes, picked it up again. But
dealing with it, never mind.
The deal I think my parents did is like, if you can wake up early enough, you got to watch it in the morning. This is what they said to my brother. You have to watch it early in the morning, and you have to get up before your younger brother gets up. So I remember waking up and I was like, I'm ready for Freddy Kruger, mother and father. And they're like, it's too late. It's already been returned. Your brother watched it. It's been returned.
They knew what they were doing.
They knew they were doing. And the cover of it, I was like, this looks like something different. This looks cooler, more interesting. Like Freddy he's not that like comic book character anymore. Like something different is about this new movie.
Well, even then, his skin, like
it doesn't quite look the same.
No,
it's got a different look to it.
Well, it's more like the flesh of someone without the skin.
Yes,
whereas
like the muscles, you can see the muscles.
Right. Whereas the other is like a burn victim.
Mm-hmm.
No, they definitely. I mean, even so much that it's called Wes Craven's New Nightmare,
and it's very interesting. And it's the ideas that it's playing with are super interesting, and they're actually like. Here's another thing I was thinking while watching it. I was like, this has more in common with adaptation than it does with a Freddy Krueger.
Sure.
And then the fact that it's like these super deep ideas and really interesting ideas, and 90s style filming in a horror movie like stuff. I was like, I don't think these styles are mixing well together. Like it felt a little bit oil and watery.
I know, I see what you're saying, and I think that does exist. I think that it was right at that time. First off, horror was dead.
Right.
This came out in the time horror movies were dead.
Scream came out after this, and that was kind of what brought him back.
Scream was his next movie after this. But I think Scream was his next movie after this. I'm pretty sure it was. But, I mean, this, I want to say, even helped
get Scream made.
Well, it helped get the studios paid attention to this. I mean, like, we think that you have something when he was pitching Scream, but I think that the New Nightmare helped horror die even further, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But I think studios are like, no, horror's not dead because Wes still has something. This is tapping into what he's got because it is kind of Screamish, but it's all evil, everything. Whereas they realize, no, what we need to go is straight real. And that's where Scream worked. Teenagers, rich kids, something that we could relate with.
Horror movie tropes as they happen.
Yeah, I mean, Scream is lightning in the bottle. We'll touch on that another time. But
well, the other thing that I thought was really interesting was this was written and directed by Craven solely. So he was the only writer. He was the director. He He was like true proper auteur with this movie.
Yeah, they gave him free reign.
And I think with pretty much every other movie, he had other writers.
Well, Bob Shea,
yes, who also is in the movie.
He's hilarious. It's hilarious that he has a cameo in the movie.
Yeah.
And because him and Wes Craven, for the longest time, up until like after part 3, I think, or when part 3 was happening, but for the longest time, they started to not get along because he basically, Bob Shea wanted to change so many different things that Wes had in visions. Like, for example, in Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, when Nancy's running up the stairs and her feet start going on the carpet, that was all Bob Shea's idea. He was like, I just always
had that on the stone steps.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's like, Wes is like, okay, if you want to do it, that's fine. He let him direct the entire scene. He's like, wow. I'm just done with it. It's like, I think it's ridiculous, but the movie's where it needs to be. Yeah. The ending kicker, whereas
with the mom gets
yeah. So originally it was Freddy driving away in the car, and then the top comes, or like the top of the convertible top comes up.
That's right.
But finally he let him say it because he's like, we have to make room for a sequel. So Bob Shea put that in there for the whole sequel deal, even though Wes Craven had no intention. And then the sequel bombs, and so they get Wes Craven back for part 3. However, he only helped.
He's a producer, right?
No, he's a writer and producer.
Okay.
He's not a director.
The only writer.
No, it's him and some other people.
Frank Darabont, actually.
Yep.
So the fact that this was just written by him, I was like, this is a super weird, interesting movie. And I imagine, like, when Wes Craven was making it, he's like, this is going to be my magnum opus. Like, people are either going to hate this or they're going to really dig it. And I think instead he found, like, a middle ground. Where, like, it's not quite, it's very good, but it's not exactly, some parts of it don't fit, like, aesthetically.
No, and they don't, like, whereas the movie Scream, start to finish holds up. And this doesn't hold up start to finish.
And I wonder, too, if it's like that, some of that 90s stuff where it's like, there's some writing moments where they're like, the kid might have schizophrenia. And it's like, and it's supposed to be a whisper, but it's like, you said that in the doorway very loud.
Yeah.
And they're like in camp is like, what?
And that kid was the flavor of the month at that time. He was like the Dakota Fanning at that time. He was in a bunch of stuff. He was in Mercury Rising.
I wrote here, I don't like Dylan.
Yeah, that's.
We went from talking about, the praises of Alex, what was his name?
Alex Vincent,
to whoever this. I know he was in Pet Sematary. This actor, I'm sorry to like be mean to like an 8-year-old kid, but he's such a bad actor.
Well, he's
unlikable.
He's an over actor.
He's an over actor, and that's the thing is like with a child actor, sometimes they're better because they're just it's like be sad. They'll be like, I don't know like what my identity is, so I'll just be sad. So it's like more real. He is like, that makes a lot of sense because he seems like a kid actor who's been acting so much that's like he can't tap into that.
He's just doing what
he's like. All right, now I will be creepy boy.
Yeah, like when you laugh at a little kid's joke and they say, "Oh, somebody laughed at it," and then they'll tell that joke over and over and over. Yeah, I see that.
He's not good. I wrote, I don't like Dylan, too much of an actor.
Yeah, no, hey, I'm with you, man. And especially when you have it to compare to Alex Vincent from Child's Play.
Yes.
I mean, that dude, seriously, like, has me in tears when I watch that. Just that scene. We've talked about that in one of our other reviews.
You believe in him. Now, some of the ideas, right? So there's that moment where Wes talks to Heather at his, like, fancy LA house. And I always wonder when I see those scenes, like, is this nicer than Wes Craven's actual house? Or is he like, actually, let's tone it down a bit?
I think that's his house.
Or maybe that's just
that's his house. I think he wanted to do so many things to film for real.
Yeah.
That, like, to make this whole real feeling about it. But as far as when you were talking about some things that didn't work, I wanted to just say this, like him maybe thinking that Wes was saying, this might be my crown jewel. This is my true baby.
Feels like that, yeah.
I feel like even though he didn't write Scream, he did write this is his true baby, but I feel like New Nightmare created Pandora's box. Mm-hmm. Scream opened it.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think in some ways he maybe had to make this movie to
get to Scream, yeah. But I do love this movie. It's not my favorite Nightmare.
I love it as a like, this was such a fun movie. At some point I was like, I'm going to give up trying to enjoy this because my brain is just going haywire trying to figure this out. and trying to be like, I don't like how they're filming this, but I like the ideas. And then I was like, I'm just going to try to like think this movie through and like kind of deconstruct what's happening here. And so that scene with Wes and Heather, it was a super interesting idea, and it's super too, because essentially we're going to throw out this mythology that everybody loves, and we're going to try to make a new one. And the new one's like, it's basically like a mixture of like Jungian psychology, which is like that all of our dreams are connected, and there's like this collective unconscious.
Sure.
And it's like, again, that belongs in a movie like Adaptation, maybe not in a Nightmare sequel, but like, I like you for doing it. And then there's also this idea that's super interesting, which is that the more you expose something to the rest of the world, actually the less powerful it is. And I was like, now you're getting into like the psychology and philosophy of horror movies. And that's, again, like a super interesting idea. But then in the next scene, like Heather Langenkamp has like
the gray, the gray streak.
So it's like oil and water a little bit, where it's like, this is so interesting, like this collective unconscious stuff. So there's this idea of like, of the grotesque, which artists have talked about. Like, you need to, like, part of the reason why you show like scary, horrible, gory things in movies is that people are so complacent. You actually need to like really scare them to make them realize that this stuff does exist in the world. Mm-hmm. Wes Craven has a wonderful quote where he's like, if the rest of the world was like sunshine and rainbows and I made the movies I made, please throw me in jail. Like, I'm making movies about horrible things, but horrible things in the world do happen. So somebody needs to like shine a light on these things.
Sure.
And I was like, that quote that I've seen that he made in some interview, I was like, that's kind of maybe the psychology of this movie. He's like, Freddy lost his power because he was always in movie theaters. He lost his power as an evil entity because he was always in movie theaters. Now he hasn't been in movie theaters. He's a dead entity. And so because artists aren't shining a light on this darkness, that actually gives the darkness more power. When you don't talk about something, it gives it more power. It's like, this is really interesting. It's kind of a philosophy class, but like, I love all of these ideas.
No, and everybody knows that Craven was a very intelligent dude.
He was an English teacher.
Yeah. Everybody's very, even, there's a reason that all these people work with him and like, no, I'm not going to do it unless Wes is there. I think that working with him was such a pleasure because he was so intelligent, and everybody says he was a delight to work with.
Yeah.
But he got those things. Mm-hmm. He understood why it needed to happen, why it should have been there, which is why when we get to the brass tacks, I'm going to definitely say this movie needed to be made. Yeah.
Okay. So I had one more thing really about.
Oh yeah.
So this popped in my mind while watching it. When I was saying like the style is wrong, the 90s feel of it is wrong, something is not working here. And as you know, I'm a big David Lynch fan. Mm-hmm. And what this made me think of is like, it could have been Craven who did it, but he should have done it in a more Lynchian style. And that idea of like dual identities, right? And that idea of like the writer and the artist and them becoming the work. That's all very Lynchian, right?
Sure.
Kind of surreal dream logic.
Like what's real, what's not real.
And then there's all this other kind of interesting just things that happen in the movie that make sense in terms of dream logic and in terms of mood, but they don't have like narrative purpose. Like the earthquakes that keep on happening. That's like, isn't the world just this weird, dark, terrible place? That kind of felt more like a Lynchian thing.
Yeah, well, that's where I was saying it was like the idea of them sort of, Freddy being sort of this evil incarnate and breaking through to the other side. Because like when the earthquake happens and then you get the walls, there are cracks in the walls, it looks like a slash of the claw.
Right.
So like, I think there is something to what you're saying. Like there is a deeper, he should have tightened up the script a little more.
Imagine if this movie was done in the style of Lost Highway.
That's what I was just about to say. Yeah. Like, what if David Lynch did a fucking Nightmare? Excuse me. What if David Lynch did a Nightmare on Elm Street film?
Yeah. No, exactly.
That would be cool.
That would be cool. And like his whole thing is dream logic and stuff. And I was like, it's like Wes Craven is kind of trying to make a David Lynch movie, but still like holding on to like the execution of scenes in a Wes Craven style.
Right, whereas David Lynch is okay for like throwing it out there and let it sit into this oblivion of whatever. Wes Craven needs a little bit more resolve. Yeah. No, I can see that. And I want a little bit more confusion with Freddy.
You know, there's you haven't seen the third season of Twin Peaks, right?
I haven't. And you've shown me clips of it, but...
It's 18 hours, and I guess slight spoilers for the third season of Twin Peaks, but the last episodes of that get very similar to this story, where it's like the characters start becoming like the real life versions of people, and it's like, why did you call me Nancy? And then, you know, her friend who's the fellow actor, she starts calling Dad, and it's like, this is super Lynchian at that point. And like, oh, now we're at the like location, and like this isn't what my house looks like, this is the house from the movie. And I was like, at that point I was like, this is Lynch, or sorry, this is Craven kind of making a Lynch movie. And I watched a Robert Englund interview, and he says, I always looked at Wes Craven like a more extreme version of David Lynch. And he said that back when he was like, he said he was always going to a bar. This was before he was Freddy. And he's like, they would have Glass House on the left, and what was the other one? Hills Have Eyes? Is that Craven? He's like, they would have those movies, and I was like, this guy, he's like a more pure horror version of Lynch. And like, maybe Robert Englund said that to him one day, and he was like, I'm gonna see
how much I can tap into that
train of thought down. But again, the ideas are great. The ideas are interesting. Like, yeah, if you talk to a lot of people who've done a lot of writing, and I can attest to this myself, there's some weird moments when you do enough writing, and I don't know if it's like just coincidence or you're tapping into something. I've written conversations that I had later with people. And there's this weird thing of like, and maybe like I forced those conversations to happen in ways that I didn't even know.
I think there's a little bit of it all. I know what you're talking about, though.
You talk to writers who've written a lot, and almost every one of them is going to tell you like, yeah, I've had that. I've written a conversation 5 years later or there's a plot point that happened.
Maybe that's where two parallel dimensions are scraping for a second.
Possibly, yeah. Or like your
deja vu, same thing.
Subconscious, the something.
Interstellar, right? The bookshelf.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That type of stuff.
Could be. And then there's the whole thing with actors too. Like, you know, I've been on movie sets where the actors started to behave like the characters. You know what I mean? So like if the character they're playing is like a crazy alcoholic, by the end of that shoot, they were acting, you know, they were drinking a lot every night, and they were kind of becoming that character.
It's funny you say that. Martin Cove from Karate Kid, he played the sensei, John Kreese, the bad sensei.
Right.
He's in Cobra Kai as well. When I saw like a Comic-Con interview of him and Ralph Macchio, they were asking him, was it hard to get back in the character? He said, actually, no. It was harder to get out of the character because after weeks of filming this, I literally found myself responding negatively to someone, to my family members, acting annoyed like the character would, because you truly get into it. You can't help it. It's like second nature.
And I didn't know that fact about Heather Langenkamp's husband also being that person. And it makes me wonder if Craven was doing like a really interesting thing and a really kind of like almost, you know, borderline dangerous thing, where I saw in an interview that, you know, one big recurring theme in it is like hereditary illness, and that Nancy or Heather is scared that she's passed down some sort of schizophrenia or something to her child, and if she has it because her parents had it. And in the interview, it was Heather Langenkamp saying, I had to talk to Wes and say, like, you can't bring in my family history. Like, she had actually had a history of that.
Oh.
And like, I'm uncomfortable, like, speaking poorly about my parents they're like grandparents who had gone through this.
Some real
actual issues with this. And then they kind of got to a compromise. But it seemed like Craven was maybe like a little bit playing with fire, right? I'm going to bring in as much reality and try to, like, you know, create some sort of neo-reality.
That's the kind of director he was.
Yeah.
I mean, some people remember him just for the Scream, and a lot of people remember him for like Scream 2 and 3, which kind of played it safe in certain ways.
Right.
But if you think about Last House on the Left, Hills Have Eyes, Shocker, People Under the Stairs, I mean, he's never played by the straight rules. He's always tried to do something crazy and wild, and I love him for that. Some of it works, some of it doesn't.
Well, I think that's all I have about it. What a strange, interesting movie.
Yeah, strange movie, but I love it. And like I said, when I went and saw it, I was just glad that I by the end of it, I found myself edge of my seat. I was enjoying it. It wasn't like I was like, what the hell is this movie? It is confusing at certain parts, but I do think that was what it was going for. Kind of like you said, going for that Lynchian vibe, but just not quite there.
Right.
Or not understanding exactly how to do that like Lynch did it, you know? I do love this movie, though. I think it's great. It is maybe, I'd say top 3
Nightmare films.
At
the same time, it's weird to compare it because
it's not a nightmare
It's
film.
not really a nightmare.
And that's what I think is so cool about it, is because it's, when have you seen another franchise by its creator be able to do that?
Right.
And make it actually
like the next
a cool deal.
Like Empire Strikes Back, suddenly them making Star Wars.
Yeah, God.
Okay, so shall we brass tacks?
Let's brass tack this.
Brass tacks. Number 1, pet peeve.
Pet peeve is, for me, I think is probably the screenplay could have just been a little tighter. I do feel like that there's certain moments where, whether it be Wes's vision in the moment while he's filming or something that he had while he was writing, I do feel like it starts to go off the rails and he has to kind of get back on track multiple times throughout the film. It never goes off the rails. It just starts to veer and he has to reel it back in. I feel like, and I can feel like he's slipping with the idea. Then he's like, wait a minute, I need to get back on track with what I was going with. That's my pet peeve.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's a super ambitious script, but it could have maybe either changed the aesthetic a little bit, make it a little bit more Lynch in its style. You know, a little bit maybe Mulholland Drive,
a little more
Lost
questioning,
Highway. Maybe just a couple more passes at the script, and I didn't like Dylan.
No, yeah, Dylan, I got to remember him too. Yeah, I do remember it, man. When I saw this, thinking that Heather Langenkamp in this was super hot, but now I look at it and she's still hot. But man, that '90s makeup with the dark maroon lipstick, and that was a big thing.
Yeah. So here's kind of an interesting question. Spin-off. Would you be interested in a spin-off that followed this mythology? So not like another Nightmare movie, but another new Nightmare movie.
I'd be... No.
Yeah.
I kind of like the fact that evil came... Like, the way I view this movie is that it's a movie about evil and the bad stuff of the world that can happen, especially with faith and beliefs and all that stuff. And it just happens to be taking the shape of Freddy.
Right.
That's the way this movie feels to me, because like we said, the mythology's not there and everything like that. So to make a spin-off, I like the idea that this form of evil taking shape didn't work. Evil's not going to do it twice. Evil's going to take another path next time. So like, for me, a sequel would dilute this movie.
See again, I'm just reminded, like, even kind of what Freddy is, just this ancient evil that's been around forever and takes different forms. That's Bob from Twin Peaks. Like, so much of this feels so David Lynch to me.
Now, when did Twin Peaks, the original, come out?
Early 90s. So there could be something there.
Yeah, and I'm not saying there is. I would be interested to see.
I'm curious now if they like knew each other or if anyone's ever asked Wes one of these questions before.
I bet you Wes was definitely a Lynch fan.
Yeah.
I bet you Wes was too much of an appreciator to not be a Lynch fan, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Now, was Lynch a Craven fan? Maybe not. I could see Lynch bashing on Craven.
Potentially. He's whenever I've seen interviews with him, they're like, have you seen like all of these movies? He's like, I've seen Wizard of Oz, and that's a great movie. Yeah. It's like, yeah, but like, have you seen anything after Wizard of Oz? He's like, Wizard of Oz is great. There's a couple movies out there that are really spectacular.
Yeah, he's a weirdo, dude. That's a weird guy.
That's not all he says.
Takes pictures with him and his son. They buy dead chickens and place them in certain shapes and take pictures of them.
I think that's perfectly normal.
Yeah, of course.
He calls those pictures Poultrygeist.
Yes! That's a great movie.
That is a movie. Yeah. Oh, that's Lloyd Kaufman.
It is.
Yeah.
Lloyd Kaufman, hey, that's a genius right there. That's a guy that's never given up and still refuses to.
He's an ambition for some.
Well, yeah. Everybody in Hollywood knows who Lloyd Kaufman is.
That is true.
Hate him or love him, you know who he is.
That's how James Gunn got to start.
Yeah. Romeo and Juliet.
That's right.
Yeah, I actually watched that movie, rented it when it came out because I was all up into Troma. So,
nice.
Toxic Avenger, all that stuff.
Class of Nukem High.
Oh, and again, those movies, you watched them, knew exactly what you were watching.
Right.
You weren't going in expecting something extravagant. You were expecting watching smut, and that's what you got.
And you definitely get it.
Yeah, they had Sergeant Kabuki Man. Do you remember that one?
No.
Oh yeah, maybe either Sergeant Kabuki Man or Detective Kabuki Man is one of them. But anyways, let's keep with the brass tacks.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Spin-off. I think I'd be down to see a Nightmare movie that takes some of these ideas and maybe does them a little bit, maybe let's say more in a modern style.
But still Freddy. That's
the weird thing too, is like this movie didn't need to be a Freddy Krueger movie. This could have been like a totally original concept.
But I think it was Wes Craven.
It adds something.
Feeling the need to correct the course, that the taste that people had in their mouths of Freddy, I think that this is his way to leave another taste in your mouth.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Derivative or original?
I thought it was pretty original.
Yeah, they did literally like. There's something interesting, maybe like future video essay material, but like why are you never see meta sequels in any other genre but horror? Why are so many horror films meta in their sequel approach? And they could have done this in a very like obvious, uninteresting way, and instead, yeah, I'd say this is very original.
It didn't seem like a cash grab by any means.
This was pre-adaptation. Charlie Kaufman stole from
that's what we need. A Nightmare on Elm Street. Wild Orchid.
The Wild Orchid. I'm thinking of ending things on Elm Street.
Starring Chris Cooper as Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, he
might not be a bad.
Yeah, he could work. Is this movie good when watching by yourself? Yes, I'd say so.
I think it's good watching by yourself, and one, because it goes away from the comedic route. It actually does try to reel you in with a story that's trying to scare you. Yes.
Will it be talked about in 20 years?
I think it will, because it's a part of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And so that will be talked about in 20 years.
If you're talking Wes Craven, I think this is also maybe the most interesting movie to like look at for like, okay, what was he trying to say? What legacy was he trying to leave?
Yeah, he wasn't going for shock. He wasn't going for a gimmick. He was trying to make something that actually, like, honestly, novel form, this might have been something that could have been awesome and then toned down for adaptation for the screen. You know what I mean?
Or, you could construe it and try to figure out, okay, so how do we make this work? How did you feel right after?
I felt phenomenal right after, but like I said, I was younger. I was like, I think in 7th or 8th grade, and I was walking out of the theater glad that it wasn't the Power Glove Freddy that I'd seen prior. But how about you?
I think by the time the movie ended, I had gone through all the stages of mourning and had accepted frustration, denial, anger. What do you mean the mythology's doesn't matter?
But what about what Roseanne and Tom Arnold said?
They were in Freddy movies. Why are they gone? A nude nightmare starring Roseanne.
Yes.
It was the original concept.
Tom Arnold's nude nightmare.
But at the end of the movie, she starts reading the script, and you realize she's reading the script of the movie we just saw. And I was like, I get it now. It's not perfect, but I understand it. And hey, that's a super ambitious movie. And it kind of backs away from them in the morning, and you hear the nightmare theme. By the end, I was like, I like this.
Yeah, it was a really nice. Yeah. It was a really nice box that you would make in wood shop that you hadn't sanded down and varnished yet. Mm-hmm. Like, it was definitely there, and it was built well, but still needed some work.
Yes. Did it need to be made? I'd say Wes Craven would say yes.
I say it needed to be made simply because horror was dead at the time. And I think that without this movie and a handful of others, we might have seen the actual, like horror was hanging on by a thread. And I'm telling you, where we are with horror today would not be there without Scream. And I don't think that Scream would have been made without studios looking at, hey, horror might be able to go a new direction away from the gimmicky slasher, TNA, sexy stuff in the woods. Like, this is actually going for something that maybe intelligent people like horror too.
Right.
I think that that's what this kind of did.
And I think had this gotten terrible reception, it'd be like one thing. But from what I heard, I think it did really well. And for the most part, Nightmare fans were like, yeah, we're not idiots. We can deal with this, and we like it, and it's something new.
Well, and
it's scary again.
People were really pissed that Freddy's dead.
Okay.
People were really mad at that movie.
Made for art or money. Every movie's made for both, but I get the feeling that this was Wes Craven making his art film.
Yeah, I think it was very much something that I feel like this was in his head and he had to get it out.
Yeah.
I feel like he would have suffered if it wasn't made.
Netflix and chill.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. However, not as Netflix and chilly as Child Play, because I think that you would actually get distracted by the plot of this one and stop chilling.
I'd say maybe no. Or at least probably the least of any Freddy Krueger movie.
Sure. No, but let me just say, maybe you're right. Maybe it's not a Netflix and chill, because if now that I think about it,
it's like Charlie Kaufman is not Netflix and chill. Charlie Kaufman is watch the movie and then cry afterwards.
Yes. Yeah, no. Okay, no, it's I'm gonna go with no, but just because it's not even a Freddy movie.
Right.
He's just part of the evil.
Right.
So like Freddy comedy, TNA, stupid situations, that makes you want to Netflix and chill. So no, I think I'm with you. No, you can't Netflix and chill it.
Okay. Parent watch. Can you watch it with your parents?
I wouldn't watch this with my mom just because she doesn't like the demon stuff. That's offensive to her. And I think this touches too much on evil. It's stuff that makes her true. Well, first off, she wouldn't watch it.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know if
Same
this
for
would.
my parents.
Honestly, I don't know if any of the Nightmare movies are safe to watch.
There's a little bit more weirdness and darkness in them than other horror films.
Imagery alone can say so many words, and they do a lot in these movies.
And this one, I think, sort of takes a lot of that to the next level, too, of... Yeah, I can't imagine watching this with my parents and them not being both like, I don't like the violence, and also, I don't get it, and that makes me mad.
Well, and I think this is a movie that you can't tap your finger and be like waiting for something. This is let me calm my mind, watch this. And,
right.
I don't know your folks well enough to say this. I guess I kind of do, but your dad is definitely like a doer. I think this movie would lose him. I think your dad needs more of this going on and stuff when he's watching it. I don't know it well enough, but I just feel like him being like, what's going on with this?
Right. Dream logic. No. Well, there you go. Wes Craven's New Nightmare. It's not quite Tom Arnold's Nude Nightmare, but it will leave a lasting impression on you.
I can't wait to show you the guys the trailer for that one.
That one's very meta.
So much that none of them even look the same anymore. They look younger now, oddly enough. Tom Arnold and Roseanne look younger than these two. Yeah. Because they both lost weight.
That'll do it.
Well, speaking of losing weight, we'll empty this dead weight now. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and COVID-5.
Till next time.
Yeah.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul too.